So this is delegated legislation. So in delegated legislation, first you write the definition of delegation. Authority, the authority holder give his authority to other. Temporary leave for completion of a particular work is delegation. And legislation has the power of law making. And in delegation, we write about Gulick who support delegation and Mary Parker Follett who reject delegation, saying that it violates principle of correspondence and authority belongs to the job and stay with it. Okay. So in delegated legislation, law making power is delegated. Law making power is delegated. So who delegate? Parliament delegate. To whom delegate? Executive. So state has three organs: legislature, executive, judiciary. Legislator formulate law, executive implement law, judiciary interpret law. So under certain circumstances, on certain situation, the legislator need to delegate its lawmaking power. So legislator delegate its lawmaking power to executive. It is known as delegated legislation. Hello. So when legislator delegate its lawmaking power to executive, it is delegated legislation. Again, I will show you the question. Delegated legislation is often viewed as a necessary evil. So limitation of delegated legislation: judicial control, legislative control. Is delegated legislation is necessary or constitutional compromise? Why constitutional compromise? This, look at this. The constitution want legislation or parliament to make law, but instead of parliament, the executive, whose authority is to implement the law. So under delegated legislation, instead of legislation, the executive make law. So it is constitutional compromise. It violates the doctrine of separation of power. So doctrine of separation of power, what it say? It say the legislator make law, the executive implement law, the judiciary interpret law. This is doctrine of separation of power. But doctrine of separation of power is violated when administration or executive who has the mandate to implement law is formulating law. So delegated legislation is an integral part of administrative lawmaking. Yes, it is integral part of administrative lawmaking. Delegated legislation, also known as subordinate legislation or administrative lawmaking. Delegated legislation is a necessary evil. It is necessary. Need of delegated legislation, advantage of delegated legislation, and most appropriate institution to supervise the use of delegated legislative power is parliament. So whatever we will discuss in this concept or in this note, you will get answer of all this question. So in this question, delegated legislation, you write first definition of delegation. Gullick support it. MP Follett reject delegation. Okay, so it will give our answer a different age. So Gullick Follett. After that, you write three organ of government. As I say, three organ of government: legislature, executive, judiciary. Legislature formulate law, executive implement law. And when definition of delegated legislation, definition of delegated legislation. When Parliament, who has the authority to formulate law, it delegates its authority to executive to make law. It is delegated legislation. Upendra Boxy, he studied delegated legislation, and we write the need of delegated legislation, welfare state, emergency state. After that, types of delegated legislation. Normal, in this normal, positive normal, negative normal, and exceptional. After type, we give example of delegated legislation. One example is ordinance. After that, advantage of delegated legislation, disadvantage of delegated legislation, or why delegated legislation is a evil, advantage, necessary. After evil, disadvantage of delegated legislation or evil, control over delegated legislation. This control here question পচারিছি parliamentary control, legislative control, judicial control. So control over delegated, three control: parliamentary control, direct, indirect. Indirect रे committee on subordinate legislation. Direct रे normal, special. In special, the concept of link. Normal, question, motion, debate, laying. A laying subject to, there are 5 type of laying. We will discuss 5 type of laying. So parliamentary control was a independent question that most appropriate institution to supervise use of delegated legislative power is parliament. Imagine. So parliamentary control we need to write in detail. How parliament. So direct, normal, laying, 5 type of laying. Indirect, committee on subordinate legislation. This is parliamentary control. Second, procedural. There are 4 types of procedural: antenatal, postnatal, consultation. Third, judicial control. In judicial control, judicial review, judicial activism, PIL, writ, statutory, appeal. So explaining this, we can have this answer. So देखो ये जहाँ जहाँ कोई लिमो judicial control, procedural control, parliamentary control, advantage of DL, type of DL, disadvantage of DL, need of DL, definition, best. So this answer, delegated legislation is a necessary evil. Why it is necessary? Why it is evil? How to control it? Integral part of lawmaking. How administration make law? What is the need, advantage, disadvantage? Why it is a constitutional compromise? How it violates the concept of doctrinal separation of power? Okay. So ସବୁ question ର answer ଏଇଠି ପାଇବ. Okay, let's discuss.